There's a story which has popped up in the Times today, which I find really quite fascinating because I think it picks up a theme which hasn't been dealt with. There's a French mezzo soprano called Katia Ledoux, and she was singing during a production of Die Fledermaus in the Volksoper, and she was booed. And she asks whether or not this was because she's black. And the Vienna is a particularly difficult opera house with a very demanding audience. It's been described as the mill of art. It grinds artists down, and certainly Katia's experience sounds very familiar from that point. Booing is not uncommon in Viennese opera houses. An audience that doesn't hesitate to express its displeasure, its discontent, its annoyance. And it's not the only opera house. Booing is very unusual in the Royal Opera House in Britain, but it's quite common in Italy. It's very common in Vienna. It's less common, I found, in Russia, where people in the Bolshoi, where I've endured some rather dull performances. In fact, the Bolshoi rather pleasantly is now going back to very traditional performances. But I remember sitting in one performance, and almost everybody around me was asleep, and it was difficult to resist the temptation. It was a wonderful, very traditional, very Soviet production of a very obscure Tchaikovsky opera. And I remember particularly on stage, about 100 people on stage doing nothing, with two or three people, I think one person singing for a long period of time, and snow falling continuously, actually continuously. It never stopped. Continually would be, or it was a continual fall of snow. It wasn't. It was a continuous fall of snow, and it uninterrupted for over 20 minutes. And by the end of that 20 minutes, there was a clear deposit on the floor. It was gorgeous, but dull as death. And nobody booed because I think everyone was asleep. But in Vienna it would be different. In Vienna, people would have called out. And last year, for example, during a performance of Don Carlos, the booing was so overwhelming that the conductor waved a white flag, waved a white handkerchief as a form of surrender, I think. Yet Katia's case feels different. Her portrayal of Prince Orlovsky in Die Fledermaus as a nihilistic and deeply depressed, tragically closeted gay character, it's just a bit too much, isn't it, really? And her lead in Carmen a few months ago, which some critics described as woke, is the problem is this sort of imposition of interpretations which doesn't come from the music. It's imposed on the music. It's often supported by the story. So if you were doing Shakespeare, possibly you could find a way to incorporate that. But when you're looking at opera, the interpretation should come from the music itself. It should be within the notes. And if you look hard enough, you can find it. And if you can pin your interpretation onto the music, then everything, then even the most dramatic interpretations and the most extraordinary interpretations work. Katia's reflection on Instagram encapsulates her dilemma. Was the criticism aimed at her performance or her identity as a black woman? Is this implicit bias, the threat of unconscious attitudes or stereotypes that affect understanding, actions and decisions? It might explain the hostility that she faced because she is black, queer, polyamorous, a left-wing artist in a city recently leaning hard right politically, following the Freedom Party's electoral victory. She has a problem, and her politics is manifest in the interpretation that she has imposed on the parts she plays. She asks the question: what if I have done nothing wrong and have been booed because I am something wrong? She says, the booing might not have been solely about her artistic interpretation. It could reflect her the mere discomfort of seeing her on stage, a challenge to traditionally, predominantly white, cisgender, heteronormative representations in Vienna's opera culture. And it's difficult, really, to see what is the thing that is wrong. And while she brings so much baggage to her performance, to her presence, I think it's equally very difficult to say, oh, this is an audience that is booing because it's racist, or because it's homophobic, or because it doesn't like the interpretation. You can't interpret that much from those boos, no matter how loud they may be. Katia has become more than an artist. She's become a symbol. Her race, her sexuality, her politics intersect in ways that unsettle entrenched and predictive cultural expectations. The boos might therefore be a reactionary response, not just to the performance, but to what she represents: diversity, progressive identity in a space that has long been dominated by tradition. And therefore, she's right. She should be there. She should be shaking things up. That is the job of art. But sadly, her experience is not isolated. There are broader social tensions where art becomes a proxy for political and cultural debates. And Vienna's opera audiences, proud of their critical acumen, must reflect on whether their reactions stem from legitimate artistic criticism or an unconscious bias. And for Katia, this experience should prompt some sort of introspection, I think, but it exposes the fragility of inclusivity in elite cultural spaces. So she says, Vienna is a city that loves to give detailed feedback, but it can also be scary when that passion turns against you. Well, absolutely. But is she and is her performance rooted in the music? Come back to that issue. Her story is a poignant reminder of the challenges faced by any artist who embodies or presents diversity in spaces traditionally resistant to change. The booing she encountered underscores the lingering power of implicit racism and homophobia and other biases, even in a supposedly enlightened cultural context. Vienna's opera culture has long been celebrated for its passion, but this incident, which is not isolated, shows that it needs to grapple with its prejudices, because a boo is something that can be interpreted on many levels, and it's not immediately articulate. Ultimately, I think Katia's courage in speaking out is a positive. It invites the wider public outside Vienna to reconsider what it means to criticize, what it means to be an artist, what it means to be the responsibility of audience members in a world where art and identity are inseparably entwined. When you perform, it is you, as well as somebody else's interpretation, as well as being a part of a great work, but it is you that is out there and that an audience responds to. And what is it that makes up you? What is it that an audience sees? Uh, the, um, what? There's a musical from the 1960s. On a clear day, you can see forever, and the main character says, "What have I got that I've lost track of?" And what is there that's new, and what is there that has been abandoned? Why is she not? Um, why is she not linking with the audience as she used to? What has gone wrong, and how can she rekindle that spirit? Because I don't believe that a Viennese audience is racist or homophobic. Not an audience that has been nurtured on Klimt and Schiller and and the great wave of modernist art that is defined by Vienna. I don't believe Vienna is a prejudiced audience, but I can believe that Vienna would not welcome an interpretation of a great work which is so drenched in interpretation and theory that its music no longer speaks.